Hello and welcome to the League of Women Voters Presents Insights and Perspectives. I'm your host for today. My name is Syedan, and I'm with the San Jose Santa Clara League of Women Voters. Today our segment is going to be focusing on the Muslim community in the Bay Area, more specifically on activities being done to build that community as well as expand it. And with us today are two wonderful women. We have Syedan Rashma Inamdas, who is the board director, or one of the board directors of the League of Women Voters for California, and then Zahra Billoo, who is the executive director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, also known as CARE. Thank you both for being with us today. Appreciate having you. So just to start off with our discussion, I wanted to get a better idea of what the Muslim community is like, and if one of you or both of you could share on what is the population size of the community in the Bay Area as well as the United States when it comes to the Muslim community?
There's been a recent study done in the Bay Area which puts the Bay Area population roughly around 250,000 Muslims. And that includes Muslims from across the board, including African Americans, as well as South Asians, Arabs, Hispanics, across the board. I think nationally, Zahra, you have better.
Nationally, I think the estimate that many American Muslims point to is about 6 to 7 million, and that is a middle number along the spectrum. So there are studies and advocates that say that there are 2 to 3 million, and some that say that there's something like 8 or 9 million. And it's really a challenging thing to count because the census doesn't count religion. The government isn't interfering in that. And at the same time, because so many people identify their religion in different ways, so some, for example, will actively participate in a religion, they will choose a mosque, and so they will outwardly identify as Muslim. Others may just have a Muslim name or may have Muslim parents, or may identify with the community culturally but not from a religious perspective. And so it gets tricky, but the number we point to is about 6 to 7 million.
So it's difficult to measure, but it's a pretty large community, would you say?
It's, it's a large community.
It's a significant number. I mean, in terms of the population of the United States, as a percentage, it may not be large, but it has certainly been growing.
Okay. And so how prevalent is the community in the Bay Area when it comes to being active and, being involved in the general community? What would you say?
I would say the Bay Area is one of the more active communities. We have many Muslims who do a lot of social work even outside of the immediate Muslim community. They volunteer at the homeless shelters, for example. They will actively participate in environmental causes. They're very active in their schools, for their children, as well as neighborhood watch societies.
There are somewhere between 50 and 60 houses of worship or mosques in the Bay Area, and so there's a lot of basis for activism, and a lot of people do tie their activism to the mosques. At the same time, I think the thing I would say is that in terms of outward engagement, particularly civic engagement, it's something that the Muslim community is growing in. Prior to 9/11, the conversation that a lot of folks had was that the community was mainly inward facing, right? Is that particularly the immigrant portion of the community, which is something in the range of 60 to 70%, with about a third being African American, and so more indigenous to the United States. But that prior to 9/11, it was inward facing. It was, how do I pay my bills and stay out of trouble, right? And that's normal for a lot of more recent immigrant communities. Post 9/11, the community has sort of really turned around, literally gone from an inward to an outward community, and continues to explore ways to engage both as a means of living out their faith in terms of bettering the community around them, being involved in the PTA, the homeless feedings, but also as a way of sort of explaining or making more personal their faith to other Americans who may not know what Islam is.
So it sounds like a pretty strong community, overall, you would say.
What was really exciting to me is, as you pointed out, after 9/11, a lot more women became involved, which was, I thought, a really positive trend. Prior to that, especially if you talk about more of the official, I guess, more religious leadership was based, mosque-based. And most of them, I would say 99.9% were men. And then slowly we started having social organizations, which are women-led. Now we have some significant social organizations which are women-led. For example, Zahra here is now executive director of CARE. We also have women now slowly being allowed on the boards of many of the masjids, the mosques.
So what do you think allowed that transition for women to kind of, take a step up?
I think after 9/11, the community realized that really we are sort of all in this together as a community. And I think it's also the community that was raised here. I think there's a growing percentage of the immigrant community for sure, which was born and raised here. And I think they come with a slightly different perspective, or I would say significantly different perspective on women's participation. At least that's what I've observed over the last 40 years.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I don't have 40 years of experience that I can cite. I think that some of it is just natural growth, right? Is that as there are questions asked about women's leadership, the community reflects and says, like, we clearly have a gap, like, how do we fill that? And also begins to recognize that there was a gap both in the way leadership was being practiced amongst the Muslim community in the United States and the way many Muslims believed leadership to be taught within the faith. And so, for example, as a American Muslim woman who was born and raised in this country but whose parents were immigrants, who sort of pushed, like my parents pushed me to the forefront and encouraged me to be a leader, like that was very much in line with our interpretation of the religion. And so I think that it's just natural to have more and more conversations as the community evolves.
Okay, so like a natural progressiveness, and, which is great. It allows the community to be tighter,
right,
and more people to be active. I know you both have very interesting backgrounds. Of course, that's why we had you on the show. And if you don't mind, Syedan, we could start with you. Can you just share your background and the organization that you are working with?
Well, I'm originally was born in India, and I came here when I was very young. And so I was essentially raised here. I got involved with the League of Women Voters more actively in the 1990s. I walked into a meeting, one of their numerous community forums, and I was grabbed and given a task to do, and so they kind of sucked me in that way. And so I've been mostly active with them, with my local league primarily, then with the county league, and now with the state league. I really believe that the mission of the League of Women Voters embodies a lot of what I believe personally, not just as a citizen of the United States, but also as a Muslim, because it has been our responsibility to care for our community. And that's what's sort of asked of us, as a Muslim, as a human being, and now as a member of the League of Women Voters.
Yeah. And I know that you're a board director for the League, and so what kind of activities, what kind of work do you do specifically for them?
Well, more recently, in terms of tying into the Muslim community, we were given a grant by the One Nation Foundation to the Silicon Valley Foundation to work with the Muslim community and encourage greater civic participation, because our very mission of the League is civic engagement at its core, right? It's citizen engagement, it's citizen empowerment, it's advocacy. So we wanted to really then engage with the Muslim community, work with them. So we work with several organizations. We work with CARE to do, for example, pros and cons of ballot measures. We've worked with the mosques to do voter registration. We've provided additional voter education materials. We've worked with the Afghan Coalition to produce a DVD in Farsi of the pros and cons. So those are sort of the range of things that we've been doing. I think it's mostly getting to know our neighbors, working together as a community on issues that impact all of us.
Right.
There are certain specific issues that I think Zahra can address that affect the Muslim community that we're most concerned about in the arena of civil liberties. But there's also things like our schools. You know, we all care about our schools. We all care about the California budget. We all care about our environment. We all care about, you know, will the potholes in our street be fixed? So it's basically essentially working together to better our community.
Okay. Now, Zahra, you do things in relation to that as well. Could you explain more of your background?
Sure. So when I was younger, for context, the career choices for South Asians were doctor, engineer, or business owner. And specifically doctor, and I was terrible at biology, and I argued a lot. And so they said, go be a lawyer. Like, we think that'll suit you, even though it wasn't sort of a traditionally expected career. And I was 17 when 9/11 happened, and so it sort of really shaped, like, the post 9/11 reality. Though I remember what it was like before. Like, the post 9/11 reality has really shaped my life for the last decade plus. And so when I graduated from law school, there was this opportunity at CARE. And it wasn't an organization that I ever thought I would work for. It was an organization I admired and I had interned for. But I had always wanted to be a Muslim voice amongst mainstream voices. So to be a Muslim voice at an organization that's driven by people of other faiths, right? That my presence alone would sort of make that difference. But there was an opportunity at CARE, and I applied. And so I've been with the organization since 2009. And so I manage the San Francisco Bay Area office, and our mission is to promote justice, enhance the understanding of Islam, and empower American Muslims. And we carry out that mission through a couple of different programmatic areas or strategies for change. The primary one is civil rights, so direct civil rights services to anybody who is complaining of being discriminated against or targeted because they're Muslim or because they're mistaken for Muslim. And so a lot of the issues that we're seeing include hate crimes and hate incidents, employment discrimination, which I think really tugs at people's heartstrings in this economy, because you shouldn't have to choose between your faith and putting food on the table. School bullying is a growing problem for the Muslim community, as well as a number of other communities, including the Sikh community and the LGBT community. And then law enforcement harassment, and that's another one that I think really sort of bothers me, because we want to be able to turn to law enforcement to protect us when our civil rights are being violated, when we're targeted, and yet we're seeing the FBI visiting dozens of community members and doing things of that sort. Our work with the League has been around civic engagement, so we don't think that it's sufficient to simply help someone who has a civil rights violation. That we need to talk to elected officials. They need to know that we're in the community and that we're their constituents as well. And then media work, so just making sure that the story gets out further than just the friendly choir that we sometimes limit ourselves to. And then outreach, so just talking to people, engaging both inside the community to educate, and then outside the community to educate and spread awareness.
That is a lot of work.
Yeah, sorry, that was a mouthful.
No, it's great though, right? And you guys have been collaborating quite often, it sounds like.
I think especially in recent years around the election with the League's mission and their specific grant funding now to empower and build civic engagement in the Muslim community, and our interest in building civic engagement in the Muslim community is that the joke that we say so frequently is that what's common is to talk to our politicians by yelling at the television, and we want to make sure that our engagement, that our community's engagement with elected officials is more than that we're developing informed voters and hopefully even potential candidates.
Okay, well, that's great though.
And I've worked with Zahra on other community issues because I'm a member of the Muslim community as well, and also part of other civic groups that we work together on projects.
That's good. We're going to take a short break really quick, and we're going to go to our fun facts for our viewers. Well, welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed our fun facts. We're going to continue our conversation here. Zahra, I wanted to say that I was reading the website for CARE, and for our viewers, I'd like you to visit it. That's CAIR.com. And I was reading on there that your organization is the largest Islamic civil liberties group in America. And I was wondering if you could share how the organization has expanded to be that large.
Sure. So CARE was founded in 1994, right around when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. For folks who are old enough to remember this, and I'm not, but I'm told that the pundits, really came straightforward, and they said this looked like a Muslim act of terror. Like no evidence, nothing, and that sort of led to hate crimes and hate incidents, and people started to have conversations about the need for Muslims to be civically engaged. And so prior to 9/11, there were 8 chapters, and CARE has really had a focus on growing grassroots offices, right? And so the headquarters is in DC, but the idea is that the local community decides if they need an office, and then the local community is responsible for supporting and sustaining that office. So prior to 9/11, there were about 8. And then post 9/11, the need just shot up overnight, as would be obvious, and there were 32. And so I think right now it's leveled out around 24 or so. And the focus is really on building that local relationship, is that someone in DC doesn't know what the civil rights needs are going to be, like the specific civil rights needs are going to be of someone in San Francisco. And I, as someone in San Francisco, I'm not going to know the needs of someone in Florida. And so it's important for us to have people on the ground to really engage and mobilize the community directly.
Well, that's great, though, especially that it's expanded and now the largest, I think. Yeah. Especially with all the work to be done. And I understand that you guys enhance understanding. I was wondering, what do you do specifically to do that?
So there's a couple of things around our strategies for change. And so the first is, going back to civic engagement, is it's important excuse me, for our elected officials to know who this community is. One of the worst sources of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim sentiment that we've seen in recent years has been elected officials themselves. And so it's important for those that are that have Muslims in their constituencies to know who this community is and what they stand for. We utilize the media because so frequently, again, we're yelling at the television or we're talking to our own communities, and so it's important for us to utilize resources like this show and like others to make sure that other people outside of the community know what the community is experiencing, but also have the opportunity to develop personal connections in that way. That when I hear someone's story, I can build a relationship with them. And then the last piece is really just outreach. So working with people of other faiths and then civil rights allies to build that understanding of who this community is. I'm terrible with statistics, and so I'd be terrible at your fun facts, but the Time magazine did a study in 2010 that said over 60% of Americans have never met a Muslim. And so that's a reminder for me as an advocate that there's just this continued need for enhancing understanding.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of work to be done. And it's never ending, but it's always progressive to something greater. That's great. Syedan, I want to go back to talking about the One Nation grant that you were speaking on. What are the details of that when it comes to deciding, well, one, like who would receive the grant? I mean, how do you decide that would be the best choice? And essentially, I know you had spoken on the goals of the grant, but expanding a little bit more, what's to choose an organization to have that grant, to participate in it. I mean, what do you really expect maybe from them to do? What are you hoping overall?
The One Nation Foundation grant was actually set up. The One Nation Foundation was set up by actually an American, regular, European extraction American investor who saw that that there was Islamophobia, and he felt it was counter to the very principles of the Constitution of this country. So he started funding these projects, and so it's a 2-year fund. We got the first year, and we got it again, and I believe CARE is a awardee for this year. What we are trying to do, utilizing our grassroots, as you know, the League is primarily a grassroots organization. So we wanted the local leagues to really develop those contacts and develop those relationships with the local Muslim community and work on the issues that are pertinent to both. For example, school bullying, I think, is a very good example. Working together hand in hand with, for example, Fremont Newark Union City League is work with I think CARE, as well as some of the other organizations to address school bullying issues. Any league within the Bay Area can apply and is awarded small grants. They're not really large amounts, but they're enough to cover things like forums, if they want to hold specific forums, if they want to do certain projects. We've had, for example, the San Jose Santa Clara League, which during elections went and did a voter registration during the Eid festivities, which I believe CARE really appreciated, because during Eid, which is like our Christmas, we wanted to be out meeting family and friends and eating the food and enjoying ourselves. Although it can be very enjoyable to register voters, I do not disagree with that.
That's true.
But to actually someone to be at the table, manning the table while we could go out and mingle and do whatever we needed, was wonderful. It's a little bit easier to come up with projects during elections, because we all think automatically about voter registration and voter education. It keeps you really busy, because the time frame is so small between the time the ballot measures are all approved and by the time you can vote. And also many people mail in their ballots, so the time frame is even short. Now, outside of the election year is when I think it really becomes critical. There was someone who said that when good people are silent after elections, bad things happen in DC. Or bad things happen in your city council, or bad things happen in your state government. So this is the time that people have to be really, I think, vigilant and hold their elected officials whom they elected accountable. And so the projects we're looking at now are focused around that issue, is to how to get more Muslims to participate in doing that. I know I really liked CARE's program that I think another organization had also done in the past, a political organization, American-Muslim Alliance. Now CARE is doing that, which they take various people to the state capitol and do lobbying, have a lobby day.
Okay.
So similarly, we're going to do projects around having people be more actively involved in the government. Go to the city council meetings, talk on a particular issue that you're passionate about, organize in an area that you're interested in. So those are the more of the kind of projects we're looking at on a post-election year.
I know that's a great learning opportunity for everyone. Of course, being a part of the San Jose League and being at the Eid event during voter registration, I know that our group learned a lot and had no idea how diverse the community was, and it was a pleasant surprise. Definitely grateful for those kinds of events. I want to ask you both, if you could touch upon this, what kind of obstacles or resistance do you face? Maybe if that's day-to-day in the work that you deal with, or something that you could be fearful of, don't want to approach you. And how do you cope with that?
I think there's a few. So the first is resources, and this is true across nonprofit work and advocacy work, is that there's a lot to do and very little capacity. And so I think that's always the first challenge. The second is Islamophobia and this fear of Muslims that I don't think is reflective of the majority of the country. Rather, I think it's the result of a very loud minority. I think that there are a handful of people that are perpetrating anti-Muslim sentiment or perpetuating anti-Muslim sentiment, and that has a trickle-down effect, right? It causes both fear inside the Muslim community and as well as fear and apprehension outside, even for maybe those who are not actually or maliciously Islamophobic. So that's the second one, and then the third one. I'm sorry, it's a list of challenges. And then the third one is just community mobilization, right? The community is interested in a lot of things and wants to make a difference. And so how do you take them from apathy and sort of status quo to a mobilized and powerful force? And so I think those are sort of the things that we're continuing to struggle with, and they're both challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I have to just ditto everything Zahra said.
Yeah.
I think she did a very good list. I would like to highlight apathy issues. And also, I don't like, well, not really defeatist, but it's sort of a discouragement sometimes with not, a single individual feeling that they can't change a system they may not agree with, or there's something they want to improve, and as a single person it may have difficulty doing that. And so this is our challenge really is to, as you said, to mobilize the community and said, one person can make maybe a little bit of a difference, but if you work side by side with all of these other like-minded individuals, you can change society into what you think it should be. You can have an impact. Sometimes people feel, well, they've elected somebody, they voted him in, and perhaps things aren't going quite the way they had expected.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of options people have. Either they can sit back and say, this system just doesn't work, or you can say, well, how do we make this work?
Right.
How do we improve this? And how can we do this together? How can we leverage off of each other's resources, especially in the nonprofit scarce resource world that we have? How do we leverage our resources so that we really make an impact?
I think just if it's okay, I'd add that there is a faith perspective to that, and it's like reminding ourselves in our communities that that a lot of the great prophets of the times before us, whether we're looking at Moses or Jesus or the Prophet Muhammad, who Muslims believe in along with the others, they were all just one person. And to whether or not one agrees with their religious teachings, to think that one person, by both being sort of morally driven, staying to their principles, working hard and leveraging those around them, was able to make such a phenomenal difference that hundreds, if not thousands of years later, we're still talking about their work. And so there's also that, which I try to remind myself of when it gets difficult.
I'm sure a lot of it just, breaking those barriers and having understanding. I know that we could talk hours probably about this, and it's unfortunate that we've now run out of time. But I want to thank you both for being here today. I really do appreciate it. And I would like to thank our viewers for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.